Good morning and happy Wednesday, folks. William Tramp, also known as This FNGM here, ready to talk to you about Encounter Party, episode 11, 1-1, not 2, 1-1. All right, we got a great episode with a lot of revelations that happened last night, but before we get into that, I should mention that there will be spoilers in this recap/review. I always have spoilers in my recap review. That's kind of the whole point of it. I'm talking about the episode after I've seen it. If you're not in the mood for spoilers, go ahead and check out this video right here. It's something else I've done that I think is pretty neat. It's part of my Want to Be a Better Dungeon Master series, which is, I'm not the only one to do this kind of thing, but you get my take on things, I guess. I don't know. Either way, let's go ahead and get started. Hit it, Tommy! I need a new joke. The Tommy thing has been done. Episode 11, New Friends, Long Forgotten. Oh, that's a mouthful of an episode name, right? All right, so in this episode, we begin inside of the corpse dungeon, and as Olivina is taking a look at the body of the beholder, Flick starts to tell us a story. Flick explains it all. So Flick's job with the organization, the shadowy one, not this group of people that he's currently with, is to attune to magic items and deliver them from one place to another, typically for, well, we'll assume nefarious or criminal purposes. That's not the point here. A while back, Flick had attuned to Murahane, the sword that Dridian is looking for. When Flick attuned himself to that blade, he was given a passenger of sorts, this rider that he carries along with him, like a intelligent source that follows him in his mind, which was played, by the way, in the episode by Brian, standing right beside Ned, talking while Ned was talking. It was a little, it was kind of cool, disconcerting a little bit. So Flick starts to explain that after parting with the sword, the rider remained, and now the rider eats curses. So he basically has this kind of like dark passenger, you know, the show Dexter, anybody? Has a dark passenger that eats curses and is fueled by cursed items, and Flick is driven out to seek these out. So we know, for instance, that Flick was blind for a bit, and that curse was because he took that curse on because of the dark passenger, I suppose. And so Flick does explain that he does have a way to cleanse himself of curses back in Baldur's Gate, which is how he is no longer blind. Dridian does state that he wants to talk more about this at some other time, and the group agrees to move on, knowing that Flick is now attached to this new sword that is cursed in some way, not allowing him to heal. So the group begins their trip back to Baldur's Gate. At one point, they finally confront Vernon, the team leader from Flint's organization, and expel him from the party. Get out of here, Vernon! We don't want your uselessness here cluttering up our time. And then they head to Baldur's Gate. When they reach Baldur's Gate, Flick states that he does need to get cleansed of his current curse. Olivina and Flick head off together with the sword in hand to go and seek out that which heals Flick. There's an interesting moment where both Flick and Olivina, both Ned and Sarah, but not Brian, head over to the kitchen to have a private conversation. I didn't even know they could do that without the DM, but that's pretty neat. And there is a moment in which where Flick sort of explains to Olivina, you know, there's a guy in town that I go see to do this, but it's pretty hush-hush, and so they head off to see the guy. The rest of the group heads back to the Sizzle Pit to drop off the body of the beholder that they had come into town with. How they got past customs, I have no idea, but it's kind of neat, right? So when they arrive, they learn from Ariadne that they are not going to be paid because the person who originally contracted this job is no longer around to give the payment. So the group starts to discuss other methods of payment, including information about the big, scary Murahane. Now, during this conversation, it is asked who actually put forth the contract, and the answer is Medigus Willowwalk. So Medigus Willowwalk was the one who had contracted this group to go out and get a hold of the beholder body, although without Olivina being there, and that's something that she doesn't get to be a part of learning, although I'm sure that they'll fill her in later, and without having Willowwalk around, well, again, they can't get paid. So there's a number of questions the group starts to ask. Really, they're kind of cashing in their plot coupons. One question is where's the uncle? And they are Vin's uncle, and they are told that they need to check the market for answers. Whereas Asher's sister, Ariadne, has absolutely no idea, although they learn that the troop, that Asher's sister's troop is stuck outside of the East Gate. Do we know Asher's sister's name? I don't remember getting that quite yet. Okay, Asher's sister's theater troupe is outside of town. They were the last ones who saw her. Who are the Future? Well, the Future has been around for quite a while, longer than anybody might think, and the group, and they haven't ever been caught. The group does mention to Ariadne that bodies of the Future were there at the large skeleton. So I guess what we're learning here is that the Longstriders were sent afterwards by Ariadne. Ariadne doesn't know very much about the Future, so she also recommends going to the market for those answers. Point of order, I thought the taverns were where we go to get rumors, but I guess it's the market. After the group gets these few answers, they head off to the Metagai stronghold or townhouse or whatever you want to call it, Metagai Manor, to regroup eventually with Flick and Olivina, and then also to discuss the information that they had been given. Now, when they arrive, Flick and Olivina are already there. We're past the point in which Flick has gotten what he needed to, although he seems a bit out of it at this point. As the group begins to discuss their next step, Medigus Almori appears with a woman. It turns out it's Tolo's Medigus. Medigus Corina Madville. So she starts to talk to Tolo, and Tolo becomes extremely standoffish during this conversation. Now, again, this is, what I love about this is we are seeing Kari act like a teenager. So a teenager may not fully understand the whole, timey-wiminess of a situation. So when Tolo is face-to-face with a face that he recognizes as a friend but does not recognize him back, Tolo responds very poorly, and at one point actually ends up storming out of the Medigus apartment, and with that, Kari actually stands up and walks out of the room. That was a little jarring. Both Vin and then Olivina decide to go and meet up with Tolo to see if he's doing okay. We cut over to the kitchen, where Tolo is pacing around outside, unsure of where to go. Vin appears and starts talking to Tolo, trying to talk him down, and then Olivina appears as well. Tolo sort of kind of shuts down Olivina during this portion of the conversation, but she does make an impassioned plea that, hey, we are friends, we are here for you. And then after being sent inside, Vin does mention, kind of reiterates those points. And Tolo seems to accept this and comes back inside. That, hey, there's, the basic idea is there's more going on here, but we've got your back. So Tolo comes in and apologizes to Medigus, Corina Madvale. The Medigus apologizes back, saying that she is sorry that she is not the person yet that Tolo needs her to be. And here's where we start to get some interesting information. Well, first of all, remember that the head of order was dealing with, time magic, right? Or, kind of believe that healing had something to do with, time magic. And, kind of reading between the lines here, we start to get the impression that at least Corina has kind of started to develop a theory that maybe what Tolo saw was a future version of her. And this may have something to do with that magic that we saw, may have something to do with the magic that the head of the order, who was somewhat of a rebel, was investigating, the healing without gods, right? And then we learn a little bit more about the head of the order. Well, the head of the order has been dead for some time. They had apparently some secret sanctum that they operated out of that the rest of the Metagai do not know where it is. They are aware, though, that the sanctum at one point burned down with the head of the order within there, so the head is gone, having perished in a fire. Although, real fast, I want to interject, where's the body? And the Metagai are also very concerned about Willowwalk's action. Now, the concern that they have, that the Medigus have, is that Willowwalk is acting against them, and that explains the secrets. While they are working to develop standardized practices for healing, Willowwalk is doing something else, possibly using Metagai resources to further some other goal, although we are very unsure as to what these goals are. As we're learning all of this, Tolo does explain to the Metagai that his visions, the dreams, including the one that they all had on the Cherry Wind, and they theorize that this is not a random chance dream vision, but rather a vision of the future, which again would kind of fit in with that whole magic, timey-wimey stuff that the head of the order, totally dead, was working on. Now, when explaining that, Olivina's death, because you remember she and Vin both were dead in that vision, upsets Medigus Almori greatly, and Medigus Almori heads out to, process those feelings. this point, the group begins to then, take a look at those visions in a different light and starts to debate what their next steps are. Olavina suggests that they head to the the sanctum of the head of the order, but nobody seems to know where that is, and so the group starts kind of bandying back and forth. Eventually, the group settles on the idea that they should head out and get some rest, and so they are invited to the Erickson estate and leave. And that's the end of the episode. A lot of reveals, a lot of information. It's a big info dump episode. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I love these clarifying episodes. We have sessions like this in my D&D game all the time. Hey, let's sit down and let's talk about the information we've gotten, because there's just a lot of information that come out during these games. And yeah, so great episode. Also, a lot of emotional pulls there. We've got Tolo's rage and Flick's feelings of loneliness and having to deal with all of this on his own. You have Dridian's like kind of simmering rage at not being aware of this situation. A lot of things going on, and I think it's a lot of fun. All right, so what I would like to talk about now is what I thought was good about the episode, what I thought was not so good about the episode, and what I'm excited to learn about next. Things I loved. We got an explanation for Flick. Ned's explanation was a slow burn, and I always appreciate that. One of my least favorite things that happen in Dungeons & Dragons games is when a character has a secret and they push to reveal that secret way too fast, right? And then if you reveal in the first 3 sessions, well, okay, great. That what about the rest of the game that we're gonna play, right? And I thought that Ned did a great job. It's very clear that he and Brian were working together on this, and I think that's always a good tip. If you have a secret you want to reveal to the rest of the party, conspire with your dungeon master. Make sure that you're both working together to make this happen in game and find a really true meaningful moment. But be careful, you don't want to miss that meaningful moment, because if you let a secret last too long, eventually by the time it comes out, no one's going to care, but that's a whole separate issue. Things I like, Kari's explosive reactions as a teenager. We've been seeing a lot of Kari as teenager time. During the Corpse Dungeon, I believe that one of his favorite lines during the Corpse Dungeon was, "Stop talking about hitting me and hitting me." I love that, because I feel that it gave us, we got to see the teenager who challenges, and then now we get the standoffish teenager, who doesn't want to deal with anybody and can't see reason, and it's great. I think it's great. A wonderful little trip that we're going on here. Also, Olavina sort of acting as the glue for the party, really trying to do her best to make sure that everybody feels welcome and that they know that they are supported. Solid stuff. Classic cleric stuff, let me tell you. But I think it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. All right. This moment was both a good and a I want to talk about the kitchen. So the fact that players can use the kitchen without having the dungeon master involved, on one hand, that's very cool. The ability to walk off and have that conversation. But it's also somewhat of a moment for me, because it seems kind of jarring sometimes. To me, it felt like Flick, Ned as Flick had permission to use that. Kari seemed really out of place, and it worked. The scene played really well, and I think everybody reacted to it, but it felt almost too natural. You know what I mean? So I know that at my table, if one of my players were, even if they were in character, to act as angry as Kari as Tolo did, oh boy, that would create a really like, whoa, hold on, are we in character or out of character anymore? Again, I know that they're trained actors, they know what they're doing, and they trust each other to do it, and I think that's wonderful. As someone who is observing it, it was both really cool, but also really jarring, because again, it's not that we see Tolo walk away from the table, even though that's what's happening. We see Kari angrily walking away from the table, and sometimes even on TV, it's kind of hard to disassociate those two. So it's kind of both a good and a moment. This isn't to cast any shade on Kari Payton in any way, shape, or form. I think he does a wonderful job. It's just more of a, oh, okay, because I try to think about how this would work at my table. So, either way, interesting, but you got to be real careful with that one. Okay, interest that I have for the future. Willowwalk. What's going on with Willowwalk? Where is Willowwalk? What's happening? Number 2, Simeon, the snake. Remember how Dridian was given a snake to take along with him on his quest, but where was Simeon this entire time? I have a feeling this is a case of the tiny little snake familiar got kind of forgotten or was never intended to be a big part of it, but Maybe not. Maybe they're behind it all. Let's see. The future. The future is. I'm very curious about the future because it's clear that the future may have the sword, and I believe that its influence has given them perhaps a new path. Again, I think that the closed eye and then the open eye symbol of the future, well, the closed eye symbol that Dridian has and the open eye symbol that the future has, I think they're absolutely related, and I believe that the sword may be what caused the change into now being able to see. But we need to know more about that sword before we can really fully understand what's happening there. Other things I want to know. What happened to the head of the order, right? Died in a mysterious fire and the body was never recovered? We've seen this 1,000 times. If there's no body, there's no death. That's the rule. It's not a rule. It's very possible the head of the order is just dead. But I don't know. You know, maybe Willowwalk is investigating because Willowwalk knows the rule. Wait, we didn't see a body. Well, we should go look for one then. You know, right? Anyway, last thing I'm really interested in seeing is time magic. Time magic has always been something I really love. I play a lot of Eberron, and there are some great hooks for potential magic involving time within that setting. So I always enjoy seeing people begin to discuss time and you know, get some of that sci-fi into your fantasy, you know, kind of stir that up just a little bit. So always a good time. Okay, those were my thoughts on episode 11. I want to thank you for joining me and talking about Encounter Party. I really hope you got a chance to catch the episode, and if you have any thoughts about it, please share them with me in the comments, or if you have any comments, concerns. If you think any of my theories are absolutely wrong, or you want to share your theories, toss them in the comments. I would love to discuss that with you. Also, if you haven't checked it out, Encounter Party has a Discord. I think you should check it out, where because there's a ton of people discussing everything that's happening. They also a number of the actors jump in while the episodes are airing to talk with us as we are watching the episode unfold, so I think that's pretty neat. And the next episode of Encounter Party is going to air next week, the 23rd of January at, oh my goodness, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Dungeons & Dragons Adventures Network, which can be found on both Freevee and Plex. Real fast, I'm going to talk about some personal stuff. I would love it if you liked this video and subscribe to what I'm doing here. Both of those really help to get this out there. Also, I have a Patreon, but I don't really like talking about it. There's a link in the thing below if you really care about that. Either way, hey, thanks again for being here and letting me share my thoughts with you and my recap with you. And I hope to see you next Wednesday.